The story started as a man named von Flüklid, also the king of the first continent and a notorious criminal. He said that his grandson is likely to become a rare villain, and all the 4 continents will perish by his hands. That's why von Flüklid killed his grandson in his past lives, but it was impossible to change the predestined fate. Flüklid experienced countless failures and saw the destruction of the world every time, with only despair remaining in the 4 continents. That's why Flüklid decided to become more cruel, but in the end, he embraced hope the day his grandson was born, and couldn't kill him. The name of this little boy is Cain von Euclid. He's our protagonist and we shall call him Cain. Flüklid called out his cute grandson and he replied, "Yes, grandfather." He then told Cain to follow him. As they were leaving, von Flüklid told Cain that if they can't change fate, then he will make Cain strong enough so that whatever fate comes his way won't be able to affect him. From then on, our MC went on a 13 years long journey with his grandfather. 13 years later, in the 4th continent, a land governed by strength, a huge man held a trembling woman hostage. His voice boomed as he demanded the swordsman hand over their goods, or he'd end her life. "Hurry up," he barked. "Do you want to trade for this woman or not?" The woman, in tears, pleaded desperately. "Please save me. I have a child, please." Her voice cracked as she begged. Among the swordsmen, a female warrior turned to their lord and said that they can't let go of the goods at any cost. It's too important to the clan. Another swordsman standing behind them hesitated, but they could save her life if they just give the man what he wants. The lord was torn. Frustration lined his face as he shouted at the towering man. "Is it not shameful for a so-called warrior to take a woman hostage?" The huge man grinned. "Say what you want. It doesn't change the fact that her life depends on their decision." The woman broke into sobs, saying that her child just started walking the day before yesterday. She begged them to save her. The lord clenched his fists. "Damn it," he muttered, his mind racing. He's in a tight spot, and don't know what to do. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension. "So, you're Kurogami Makoro, the Black Wolf Demon?" The huge man's expression twisted into a snarl. "Who's there?" From the shadows emerged a guy with a cold gaze. Turns out to be Cain, our grown MC. Cain said to the huge man, "So you have succumbed to evil." The huge man froze in confusion. What does he mean by that? Before he could finish, Cain stepped without hesitation, struck, and in an instant, both the hostage and the huge man fell to the ground, their severed heads rolling in the dust. The Lord of the Swordsmen erupted in rage. "Why? Why did you kill the hostage too? Who are you to do such a thing?" Cain didn't answer. Instead, he sprinted toward the group with deadly precision. In a blur, he slayed the swordsman standing behind the Lord. The warrior lord screamed in shock and charged at Cain. "How dare you attack my men?" the Lord yelled. He raised his blade, but Cain parried with an almost casual flick of his sword, sending the Lord flying backward. As the Lord crashed to the ground, he muttered, "Damn it, he've lost control. Now it's over for him." The female swordsman lunged at Cain, her weapon aimed straight for his throat. But Cain didn't flinch. As the blade approached, he spoke in an icy tone. The hostage was an accomplice of the demon, that's why he killed her. Her blade froze midair as his words sank in, and the battlefield was silent. The warrior lord stared at Cain, in disbelief as he asked, "What does he mean by an accomplice? She looks normal. She doesn't look like a demon." Cain crossed his arms and replied flatly, "Also the guy he killed, their fellow warrior? Yeah, he was an accomplice too." The lord's jaw dropped. "What the hell? That's impossible." Cain smirked and gestured toward the bodies. "If you don't believe me, check their pockets." Makoru, being part of the Kurumi demons, always carries proof of their allegiance. The warriors hesitated but eventually checked the 3 bodies. Sure enough, they found the unmistakable badge of the Kurumi demons. The Lord shook his head, stunned. He couldn't believe it. That warrior has been with them for years. How could he have been in cahoots with demons? The group bowed in gratitude to Cain, one of them saying, "Thank you for figuring this out for us." Cain waved them off. No need to thank him. He only did what anyone else would have done. The Lord stepped forward. But wait. How did he know they were Kurumi demons? How could he be so sure? Cain shrugged. It's not like he knew they were demons. He simply attacked evil. His blade never lies, it always strikes true against wickedness. In the next scene, the atmosphere shifted to a lively bar, where people from various tribes drank and celebrated. Cain's grandfather, von Flüklid, sat beside him sipping his drink and smirking. "You did well defeating evil and saving the good," Flüklid commended. With a serious look, Flüklid then asked, how was Cain so sure the hostage was an accomplice of the Kurumi demons? What if she had been innocent? Cain replied that she wasn't innocent, she was with the demons. On what basis, Flüklid asked. Cain tapped the pendant hanging around his neck. This pendant, the grandpa gave to him years ago. It revealed their true nature. They were cloaked in darkness. Flüklid let out a dry laugh. Oh, the sacred ring. So it did tell you. Interesting. Cain raised an eyebrow. Wait a second. Isn't the sacred ring a divine artifact from the third continent? Grandpa, you didn't steal it, did you? Flucklid scoffed. Quiet. There was no other way to interfere with his fate, and yes, he borrowed it permanently. Cain grinned slyly. Did you borrow anything else? Maybe a piece of the celestial realm? Of course I did, Flucklid retorted. You think artifacts grow on trees? Cain laughed. So Grandpa's a legendary thief and a great warrior. Not bad. Flucklid shook his head. You talk too much. Be quiet before someone hears. Their banter ended with Flucklid's serious tone as he asked Cain to tell him if the ring truly shows him their darkness. Cain nodded. Yes. The 3 people he killed were entirely evil. So he followed his grandpa's teachings and acted without hesitation. Flucklid sighed. Then it seems Cain's heavenly killing star has broken free from fate's shackles. He said Cain shouldn't dwell on these things too much, or his head would explode. Flucklid told Cain that he has now inherited his looks and strength, after all. Cain snorted. Was that a compliment or an insult? Take it however you like, Flucklid said with a laugh. Later that night, as they prepared to rest, Flucklid called out, Cain Von, there's nothing left to bind you. Live freely. With a determined face, Cain replied that he'll do good for good and show endless malice for evil. The grandpa said that hearing those words reassures him. He's really glad. The next morning, Cain awoke to a letter on the table. As he read it, his grandfather's words echoed in his mind. He's sorry to say this, but their journey ends now. He told Cain to live a life unbound by fate. And remember, no matter what anyone says, you are not a villain. With a smile, Cain tucked the letter away and set out on his path. His first stop, a forest teeming with Kuromi demons. He wasted no time slaying them, cutting down foe after foe with ease. One demon with a tribal mark on his eye sneered, You're not bad, kid, but you insulted Kuromi. That's unforgivable. Before he could finish, Cain interrupted with a clean strike. You talk too much. As the battle raged on, Cain's sword broke mid-swing. He sighed. This sword didn't even last through 100 demons. 2 remaining demons charged at him, screaming, You bastard! Cain dispatched the first effortlessly, muttering, First come, first served. The second demon begged for his life. Wait, please let me explain. Cain wasn't in the mood. He silenced the demon with a punch that shattered his nose. Cain then grumbled that knocking people out without killing them is harder than it looks. The guy fell to the ground begging our MC. He told Cain that he's just a low-level Kuromi with no value. Cain said he's aware. The guy was like, Huh? How did he know? Turns out that our MC has a pendant that detects evil, and for this guy here, the pendant shines white, which means he's not evil. Cain then told the guy that he sees potential for his rehabilitation. He should repent in prison. With the battle over, Cain grabbed a new sword from the corpses and was about leaving when he noticed a bright figure on a nearby rooftop. It was someone he recognized, a sword master his grandfather once introduced him to. Cain then said he would leave the fate of this Kuromi to the master. The master observed Cain, impressed. So, this is the foreigner who slays Kuromi demons with a single stroke. He was eager to see who it was, but he's now more shocked by the fact that Cain could sense his presence from that distance. Is not an ordinary person indeed. But he wondered, why did he let one of the Kurumi go? It's as if Cain left the last person's fate to the man. But as he was looking, a lady walked up to him and called out, Master! She asked him, what is he doing here? But the master said, yeah, he has a place to go first, and sprinted away from the building. As he was sprinting, the girl said she will follow him too. And as they were running, just as the last guy was about escaping, they struck him with a stone on his head, adding to the pain Cain has caused him already. As they landed, the master said with a sigh that he almost let him escape. The disciple asked him, who is this person? And the master said, the guy is a Kurumi demon. Upon hearing this, the disciple became furious and the smile on her face changed. She pointed her sword to the Kuromi and said, he is still alive. Can she finish him off? The master declared, no, the Kuromi will be judged by the law at the government office. However, his disciple asked if it's necessary to go through such trouble. Why not kill him immediately? She believed immediate action was the best solution. The master replied calmly, someone specifically requested that he handle the Kuromi himself. The girl frowned in disbelief. What? Who could make such a request from such a distance? How did they even know her master was here? She was shocked, realizing that whoever it was must have detected the master's presence from an extraordinary range. Even the top disciples of the clan struggled to locate the master despite their best efforts. The only reason she could find him now is because she knows the places he occasionally visits. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to track him. The master smiled faintly. That child has good eyes. The disciple's surprise deepened. Child? Is her master saying it was a child who managed to accomplish this? Is he around her age? The master nodded. Yes, about the same age. At that moment they noticed a broken sword lying on the ground. The master chuckled dryly. It seems to be the sword the boy used to fight the Kuromi demons. The girl's eyes widened. For the sword to break, does that mean he didn't use internal energy to shield the blade? Then it clicked for her. She realized with amazement. Wait, he defeated the Kuromi demons without relying on internal energy. That means his physical skills and swordsmanship are superior to hers. Meanwhile, in the central continent, an autonomous region established to promote peace between all 4 continents, people from across the world gathered in harmony. The area was bustling with life, lined with specialties and famous goods from every corner of the world. Merchants eagerly advertised their businesses to the lively crowd. Amid this bustling scene, our MC strolled through the marketplace. Observing the overwhelming crowd, he muttered to himself with dry eyes, "There are too many people. Where's the train station?" As Kane wandered, a woman resembling a shaman approached him. She began to speak, but Kane interrupted. "I'm not interested." The shaman, undeterred, urged him not to say that. She told him that the person who'll read his future is the priestess from the second continent, the one who sees fate. Before Kane could respond, a silver-haired beast woman appeared and addressed the shaman. She'd like to meet someone who can tell her fortune. The shaman nodded. Of course. What would she like to predict? The silver-haired woman explained. She can see other people's fates, but she can't hers, so she's eager to find someone who can. Kane paused, observing the woman. He noticed her silver fox-like features and realized she was from the Silver Fox clan. Before he could think further, the woman turned to him and asked, "Does he find her ears and tail strange?" Kane started to apologize, but the woman waved it off with a smile. No need to apologize. She thought he might be interested in her. How about it? It must be fate that they met like this. Why don't they get their fortunes told together? He should not worry. She would pay for both of them. Kane, feeling awkward, declined. The woman sighed and said, "It's fine. She'll leave then." She walked away, and the shaman, now losing both potential customers, muttered in frustration, "Damn it, what a terrible day." As the silver-haired woman left Niriel, her bodyguard approached and suggested, "Should we deal with that guy for turning you down, princess?" The woman turns out to be a princess from the second continent and the real priestess who sees fate. She shook her head. "No, leave him be. She was the rude one." The princess remarked that it was fine if they ignored minor incidents. She confessed she was more intrigued by the guy from before. Upon hearing this, Niriel gasped and asked if the princess had fallen in love with the guy at first sight. The princess smiled and denied it, explaining there must have been a misunderstanding. That was not what she meant. Niriel apologized, but the princess continued, saying she was interested in our MC because she couldn't see anything about him. The princess elaborated, stating that she couldn't see anything about his fate, even with her abilities as a priestess of the oracle. She described it as if everything about him was a mystery. His presence was entirely flawless, colorless, odorless, and enigmatic. It was the first time in her life this had happened, and she couldn't help but feel compelled to speak with him. Niriel asked if they should investigate the guy further, but the princess refused, insisting it wasn't necessary. She reassured Niriel they would likely cross paths again. Surprised, Niriel pointed out that the princess had just mentioned she couldn't see his fate. However, the princess clarified that while she couldn't see his fate, she saw something else entirely. Oddly enough, their destinations aligned. When she looked at him, she was reminded of an old gentleman she had met by chance 10 years ago. That man had been none other than our MC's grandfather, the notorious villain. Niriel hesitantly asked if the man could be the villain who had stolen the first Beast King's treasure. The princess nodded, recalling how Flucklet had once told her that fate was something one must grasp for themselves. If she couldn't see anything, she needed to take action. For some reason, those words had stuck with her since then. That was why she unconsciously noticed the train tickets our MC held, confirming they would meet again at the same destination. Meanwhile, Kane, after getting on a train, reflected on the silver-haired woman he had encountered earlier, wondering if she was the priestess his grandfather had warned him about. Before Kane's departure, his grandfather had spoken cryptically about 3 stars influencing his fate, and one of them being a priestess of the Silver Fox clan. She was said to be destined to pierce his heart with a spear. Kane found it strange that the priestess, supposedly his enemy, had shown him kindness instead of hostility. He speculated that his fate might have shifted toward neutrality. If so, he wondered if other aspects of his destiny had also changed. His grandfather had warned him that more than 20 individuals were destined to kill him. Kane's journey was, in essence, a desperate attempt to twist those fates and survive. After some time, Kane arrived in Barakal, the capital of the central continent. He sought out a renowned blacksmith's establishment and was greeted by a female blacksmith. She inquired about his purpose, and Kane explained that he was searching for Kyle Sama. Startled, the blacksmith stammered, mentioning that Kyle-sama rarely entertained walk-ins. To meet him, one usually needed an appointment. Kane presented a box, stating that it was for Kyle-sama. When the blacksmith asked what was inside, Kane admitted he didn't know, only that his grandfather had forbidden him to open it. He assured her that if Kyle-sama still refused to meet him after seeing its contents, he would leave quietly. The blacksmith took the box to Kyle-sama, musing that Kane wasn't the arrogant customer she had initially thought. As she departed, a male clerk named Dean entered, chastising her for attending to annoying customers. He remarked that she was far too kind. However, Kane noticed the man's aura was black, marking him as evil. Din mocked Kane, calling him a pesky bastard, and suggesting he use money if he wanted to meet Kyle-sama. However, Kane kept his thoughts to himself and instead commented, "It's strange. A blacksmith clerk with a black aura like that? Someone like him deserves to be dealt with immediately." Din, noticing Kane's stare, suddenly turned his attention toward him. His face twisted in annoyance as he barked, "Pesky bastard! If you want to meet Kyle-sama, stop with these shabby tricks and use money. Become a VVIP, and he'll get a chance to meet him." Walking up to Kane, Din sneered and continued, "Not that someone like him could ever afford it." Kane, unbothered by Din's aggression, smiled faintly and replied, "Even if he had the money, he wouldn't have a reason to buy their weapons." Din's irritation grew, his voice rising. "What did you just say? Are you trying to act stubborn?" Kane shook his head. "Not stubborn, just stating a fact. There's no reason to buy a sword that can't even handle his strength." Din's expression darkened further. "Does he think their famous swords would break?" "Of course," Kane replied calmly. "Their sword would break in his hand." With a wicked grin, Din leaned closer. "Is that so?" He asked Kane to show him his strength. "He'll take responsibility." Kane tilted his head slightly, his voice turning sarcastic. "Can someone like you even take responsibility for anything?" This remark struck a nerve with Din. "What did you just say?" he shouted, his voice trembling with anger. While Din fumed, Kane's attention shifted to a nearby sword. Its flashy, eye-catching design stood out in the room. "Oh, wait. There's a third-rate sword over there. Even someone like Din could probably take responsibility for that." Din growled, his fists clenching. "You bastard!" Kane ignored the outburst, walking up to the sword. He examined it briefly before smirking. "It's a replica," he declared. "It looks flashy on the outside, but it's just poor quality trash. A sword that suits the clerk perfectly." Din froze, his anger replaced by shock. "How did Kane know it's a replica just by looking at it?" he demanded. Kane didn't answer immediately. Instead, he swung the sword lightly, and with a loud bang, the blade shattered in midair. Din was stunned, his jaw dropping as he stared at the broken weapon. "What the hell just happened?" he stammered. "No matter how bad the replica is, how did this boy break it with a single swing?" As the commotion unfolded, a powerful voice cut through the room. "I haven't visited this store in a while, and it seems I've come at an interesting time." Everyone turned to see Kyle-sama, the blacksmith boss. Kyle's sharp gaze landed on the shattered remains of the sword. He directed his attention to Din. "Deputy Manager Din," Kyle began, "why is such garbage even placed in this sanctuary? Explain yourself." Din's confidence crumbled as panic set in. He told Kyle-sama that it wasn't his fault. He said it was Kane who suddenly destroyed the sword. Trying to shift the blame, he said that they should call the guards immediately. Kyle raised a hand, silencing him. "Shut up, Din," he commanded firmly. He didn't ask about Kane. He asked why such trash sword is here in the first place. Din trembled, unable to speak, as he stood there, deprived of words and water. He didn't know how to deny the accusations against him. Kyle-sama observed his reaction and calmly stated, "His reaction says it all. Now they understand why rumors about defects in their weapons are spreading. This incident cannot be overlooked." He then ordered 2 of his other blacksmiths to take Din away for punishment. As they dragged him out, Kyle-sama warned Din to be prepared. He would pay dearly for tarnishing the store's reputation. As Din was being taken away, he begged Kyle-sama to listen, but Kai dismissed him, calling him a trash. Dean muttered that their swords were subpar. He said that our MC had belittled Lord Kale's sword. Kane had said their swords couldn't withstand his strength, and even if he had the money, he wouldn't buy such third-rate weapons. Kai-sama glared at him, ordering him to be quiet. "I'll deal with you later," he added. Once Din was out of earshot, Kyle-sama turned to Kane and asked, "Everything that Din said just now, was it true?" He asked if Kane said all that about their swords. Our MC nodded. "Yes, it's true." Kyle-sama sighed. He had high hopes for Kane. When he brought this item from Flukelid, Kyle's old friend, he thought it would be something remarkable. He handed the stick back to Kane, which he had received as a present, and said, "Take it back. He'll pretend this never happened." Kane caught the stick and examined it, realizing it was what was inside the box his grandfather had given him. Suddenly, Kyle-sama presented Kane with a sword, a blade among the top 3 famous swords on display. Take this. Leave my sight immediately, he instructed. Cain, however, looked at the sword with disdain. Kyle-sama, sensing his hesitation, asked, "Don't you like it?" He recalled Cain's earlier words about their swords not being worth buying and now asked, "What will you do? Will you pay for this sword with gold coins?" Cain took the sword but spoke up. Although his previous statement was insensitive, he understood if Kyle took it as an insult. But it's a misunderstanding. He unsheathed the sword and explained, he didn't mean to belittle their sword, he only spoke the truth. It's not just their sword, any famous sword can't withstand his strength. With a powerful swing, the sword shattered instantly. Kai-sama stared in shock. How surprising. The famous sword broke without mana being infused. It's unbelievable that a boy like him with just raw strength can put such pressure on the sword. A while later, both Kyle-sama and Cain sat down, and the old man apologized. He was wrong to insult the grandson of Fluklid. Cain, however, responded, "No, it's him who should apologize." He also said something rude. Deep down, Cain reflected on his actions, realizing that he needed to be more considerate. He's not good at understanding people's feelings, he thought to himself. Kai-sama then asked, "What's the reason Cain came to see him?" Bringing a mistletoe branch suggests it's something important. Cain seemed surprised. Oh, so that piece of wood was a mistletoe branch? He didn't know. Kale-sama, intrigued, asked, "You brought such a rare item without knowing what it was?" Cain answered, "Yes, his grandfather told him never to open the box. By the way, is this branch really that valuable?" Kyle-sama nodded. Valuable isn't the right word, it's a treasure among treasures. Anyone would call it divine. At the mention of the word divine, Cain muttered to himself, his grandfather must have stolen this. He then voiced aloud, "For a divine item, the mistletoe has a weak aura." Kyle-sama chuckled and said, "That's because it's not precious yet. But if he make weapons from this mistletoe branch, it can give any sword the qualities of a divine weapon." Cain, intrigued, asked if he will make a sword for him out of it. Kyle-sama was shocked and asked what he meant. Cain explained, "As you can see, he can't wield metal properly. Any famous sword he uses breaks before he can even swing it, but there's a reason for this." Cain revealed that 10 years ago, after consuming the treasure of the deep sea, an item his grandfather stole, his body became unable to handle metals. It's not just iron. Even materials like orichalcum and meteorite are destroyed when he touched them. All weapons are made of metal, so he've never had his own weapon. He always have to borrow one. Kyle-sama nodded slowly. A destructive nature, he've heard of it. Sounds like the legendary beasts of the deep sea. If this is Cain's constitution, now he understands why Fluklid sent that mistletoe branch. A weapon made from it wouldn't be affected by Cain's condition. Cain stood up suddenly. Does that mean he can finally have his own sword? Kyle-sama smiled. Yes, he can. Cain nodded eagerly. Please, make me a sword. Kyle-sama reassured to trust in him. He'll have it ready soon. Cain then began to leave the Ironheart's building. As he walked away, he thought to himself, he almost gave up on having a weapon, but this might be the last gift from his grandfather. Suddenly, Cain noticed a commotion among the blacksmiths. They seemed frightened, murmuring that they needed to report something to their boss. As the lady moved to inform him, Cain approached her and asked, "What's going on?" They seemed serious. The girl was like, "Cultivator guest?" From her expression, Cain asked her if Din escaped by chance. Startled, the girl said yes. She promised they would capture him and bring him to justice. They begged Cain to forgive them for letting Din escape. Cain found the situation awkward. He thought, is it really necessary for them to apologize this much for letting Din escape? He recalled the girl calling him cultivator guest and realized that they had misunderstood him as a master from the fourth continent. Most masters from there were known for difficult personalities, which is why the clerks feared him. Among them, the only one with a normal personality was the sword god. Cain, aware of their misunderstanding, told them, "Lift your heads up." The clerks, relieved, thanked him for understanding, but before they could look up, Cain had already disappeared. Not far from the Ironheart's building, our MC was suddenly attacked by a group of notorious criminals. The leader of the gang ordered his warriors to kill Cain, dead or alive. Anyone who brings him down gets 3 ounces of gold. The criminals cheered, eager for the reward. As they continued yapping, Cain noticed their dark auras. These are evil people. He don't need a reason to slay them, he thought. With a swift movement, he began cutting through them, thinking to himself, they're all third-rate. However, his sword broke again during the battle. One of the criminals yelled, calling Cain an idiot for leaving his back wide open. But Cain quickly dodged the attack. Since he had no sword, he used his fists to strike back, delivering a barrage of punches. Then, Cain picked up an axe and launched it toward one of the criminals, shattering his skull as if it were a balloon. Now, turning to the remaining attackers, one of them asked the captain, "Who the hell is this guy?" The captain assured him not to be scared, stating that the opponent was alone and posed no threat to all of them. But before he could finish speaking, Cain knocked him down and raised his sword toward his leg. With a swift strike, Cain stabbed him in the chest, killing him instantly. The remaining attackers, about 3 in total, yelled, questioning how dare he kill their captain. But just as they were about to attack him, our MC spinned like a tornado and slayed them all at once. Only 2 attackers were left now. The first one, trembling, said he'd been threatened. If he didn't help with the attack, they would have killed his family. Cain, as vicious as ever, slayed him in an instant. Then, he walked up to the last attacker. Before killing him, he said he would ask him one question, and if he answered honestly, he would spare his life. The man, crying, yelled that it was a lie. Cain would kill him anyway, no matter what he said. Our MC, however, gave an oath on his sword, a promise made by a swordsman to their blade. Breaking it would restrict the use of mana, and for a master, it could be fatal. Cain then swore on his sword that if the man answered honestly, he wouldn't harm him. The man, unsure but desperate, asked if Cain was truly serious. "All right," the man said. "What do you want to ask me?" Cain asked him who had sent them to attack. The man paused for a while, but after some silence, Cain grew impatient. He stabbed the man in the leg and demanded, "Will you answer my question?" The man yelled in pain and finally said, "It was Din. It was Din who sent them to attack Cain." Cain nodded as expected. "It's him," he muttered. "There's no one else." He then asked the man, "What is the root of this request?" The man replied that there was a large organization based in the capital, Barakal. Din had used his connections to get them involved. Cain muttered in disgust. "Trash, Din." He realized that this man had to be part of a criminal organization. It made sense now. Working fraud in the shop wasn't the level of black mana Din could pull off. Cain then asked, "Where is their base?" The man replied, "There's not just one. It's a huge organization with many branches. The headquarters, though, is at the resting place Leon. That's their main base of operations. And that's where the request came from." Cain processed the information. "Resting place Lan. It's close from here. It reeked of an evil aura." He turned to the man. "Just to make sure, he's not lying, right?" The man swore that he wasn't lying, and Cain nodded. "All right, I believe you. It doesn't seem like he's lying." The man then said he would leave, but Cain stopped him. "No, I'll kill you." The man yelled, "Didn't he swear on his sword that he wouldn't kill him?" Cain responded coldly. "Unfortunately, the sword oath doesn't apply to him." The man's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's impossible. The sword oath applies to every swordsman." Cain smirked. "Not anymore. Since he ate the celestial peach his grandfather stole, the gift of mana disappeared from his body. The restrictions that bind mana no longer apply to him." The man, still in shock, said, "Wait, even so, breaking a warrior's promise of pride, it's not right." Cain nodded. "Yes, a warrior's pride is important, but there are exceptions. A promise made with a villain is not a promise." Cain swung his sword with a swift motion, decapitating the man. The man's head hit the ground with a sickening thud, and his sword shattered in the process. Afterward, Cain let out a sigh. He thought this sword would last for a while, but it didn't even last 10 swings, he muttered. As expected, he need a sword that won't break. In the resting Leon, Cain examined the environment. The building, from the outside, looked like a normal lodge. But that was only true for the lobby and the exterior. When anyone used the hidden passage inside and went to the basement, they found a place filled with notorious criminals. It was a hub where all kinds of dangerous individuals gathered. Inside the building, a group of criminals were gambling. They even humiliated a little boy by the side, treating him like a dog. One of them sneered and asked their fellow member, "Where did you get this little brat from?" He laughed and answered, "He grabbed him from some random place." Meanwhile, a man yelled in frustration, "Damn it!" It turned out to be Din, Ironheart's former deputy manager, who's on the run. He muttered angrily about the idiots he sent, who couldn't even handle Cain. More importantly, he looked up and saw a masked man. Had he known the man was coming, he wouldn't have left those bastards to handle our MC. He would have sent the masked guy to deal with Cain himself, Dean said, his frustration growing. The masked man was well known as a capable figure, even in Atla, the most notorious organization across the 4 continents. For him to be here, it meant that the boss had high expectations of Din. Din then asked the masked man if he was planning to make his move right away. The masked man responded coldly, "What do you mean, make a move?" Din asked, "Isn't he here to deal with Cain who disgraced him?" The masked man shook his head, explaining that the only orders he had were to retrieve something from Dean, nothing else. He was only told to get the information that Dim had on the Iron Heart, the masked man added, glancing at Dean. "Are you sure you don't have something more to report to the general boss?" Dean froze, a little scared. He wondered if, after giving the masked man the information he needed, the man would kill him. But as if reading his mind, the masked man assured him, "I wasn't ordered to dispose of you. You're safe, for now." The masked man was then handed a small card. He looked at it and said, "All right, He received the item. He'll be leaving now. But Din wasn't done. Wait, he called out. If he's leaving, who's going to protect him while he's on the run? Suddenly the masked man snapped, "Shut up, you fool." He asked if Din did not notice the sudden quiet in the building. Outside, something was definitely going on. Back in the gambling hall, the little boy, who had been humiliated, covered his eyes. "I've already counted to 20, he said. "Can I open my eyes now?" Kane, who seemed to have infiltrated the base, freed the little boy from his chains and gently told him, "Please keep your eyes closed for a little longer." Inside the building, Din and the masked man were both shocked by how Kane had managed to infiltrate their base. They prepared to attack him, but our MC ignored them. He turned his attention to the boy and said softly, "It's fine for him to sleep now. By the time he opened his eyes, he'll be in his mother's arms." Once the boy fell asleep, Kane turned to face Din, and as their eyes clashed, Din felt a chill run down his spine at the sight of Kane. The masked man looked at Din and asked if he knows him. Din nodded, his voice trembling. "Yes, it's him, the damn brat who disgraced him." The masked man chuckled. "Wow, this kid is something else. He's pretty impressive for his age. Was it really necessary for him to go this far by killing their colleagues?" "That's cruel." Kane smirked. "Cruel? How laughable," he said. "They wouldn't even understand the meaning of the word cruel. All he did was decapitate the man boasting about decapitating others. He tortured those who enjoyed tormenting others as hard as he could before killing them. Isn't that fair?" The masked man argued. "Since his opponents were weaklings, shouldn't he have shown mercy?" Kane's grin twisted into something darker. "Mercy? That's a word unfit for them." With that, he unsheathed his sword. "All he offer is endless malice." The masked man bristled and took a fighting stance. Kane's eyes narrowed. "What sin are you guilty of?" The masked man was taken aback, but before he could respond, Kane moved. In a flash, he lunged toward the masked man, slashing his neck. The sword pierced through midway before shattering. The masked man stood stunned, unable to sense Kane's presence at all. Kane then left the man growling in pain. Then, Kane walked toward Dean. As he walked, he told the masked man not to move. He had only managed to cut his neck halfway. If the man moved, he would only die struggling in pain. But it seemed like the man wouldn't last long, as he fell to the ground and died. With an evil grin, Kane told Dean that now it was just the two of them. Kane's presence alone made a grown man like Dean shed tears. As Kane tortured him, Dean yelled in pain, and anyone nearby could hear it from miles away. Back at the Iron Arts building, Kane laid the little child he had saved on a couch. He then told Kael-sama everything that had happened. Kael was surprised to hear that Dean was a member of Atla, the notorious organization. Then, Kane handed Kael the data chip that Din had intended to give to the organization. Kael observed it closely. "A data chip from the third continent, huh? Seems like an older model." Kane nodded. "He believes it's for security reasons. Since the model came out before mass production, it will be hard to find a tablet to retrieve information from it. Therefore, it will take time to uncover the information Dean stole from the workshop." Kael sighed. Now he can't even figure out what information the Artla organization is after, and it makes him restless. Kane told him to remain cautious for now, since they didn't know what the Artla organization was planning. Kael agreed. Yeah, he'll definitely be cautious. After all, he won't be able to make Kane's sword if anything happens. Kael then said, "By the way, he'd been meaning to ask this. Who is that child Kane brought in?" Kane's face went pale. He saved the child from that group of ruffians. He was wondering if Kael could look after him for a while. With Atla involved, he can't exactly trust the government or the guards with him. Kael nodded. "No problem. He'll take care of him and find his parents." Kane thanked him, preparing to leave, but Kael stopped him. "Wait," Kael said. "It's about the box with the mistletoe branches." When he opened the box, he found a secret compartment. Inside was a rolled paper, which seemed to be a letter. It's probably a letter from Fluklid, Kane's grandfather. Kane was surprised. He hadn't expected that to be in there. "Thank you," he said, taking the letter from Kael. As Kane was leaving, he told Kael, he'll contact him when he find a data chip reader. Kael responded, all right. Then Kane left. Meanwhile, back at the resting Roan, the princess and the Neriel inspected the room of dead bodies. So many criminals taken down in such a short time, the princess mused. Who could it be? Who could be powerful enough to face off against Artla? Neriel replied. As far as she knows, there's no one like that in the central continent. The princess wondered, could it be someone on their side? Neriel shook her head. Who knows? But one thing is for certain, the person who did this to the criminals is highly capable. Even if they are on their side, she don't think that's something to celebrate. The princess agreed. That's true. It feels like the person went a little too far. They might be someone impossible to talk to, looking at the way the body was decapitated. It felt like she'd seen this method of killing before. With a glee in her eyes, Neriel said, At least they now know there are others out there hostile toward the Artla organization. The princess nodded. It would be nice if more people like that were out there, fighting against Artla. She paused. Well, whatever the case, she'd like to meet the person who did this at least once. Neriel bowed and said she'll investigate the person. In another scene, Kane went through the letter from his grandfather in a motel. It read, "If he's reading this letter right now, then that means he must have gone to the central continent and met Kyle. He probably would have received a branch of mistletoe and then asked for a sword. Afterward, he should have met the priestess who can see faith." As Kane read, he muttered to himself, although those were all coincidences, how could his grandfather have predicted all that? The letter continued, "Then he must have clashed with the Artla organization at Barakal. If everything has gone according to plan, then Kane will lose his life to Artla." Kane frowned. Lose my life to Artla? In the next scene, Kane woke up early in the morning. As he walked tirelessly with no emotion, he said that if only he had mana, he wouldn't be this tired. People who use mana don't need to sleep for long since mana energizes the body and brain, helping them recover from fatigue. But first he needs to do what he came here for. He walked to a store and asked the owner if they had the TK series. The man replied, "No, that was released years ago. There's no way they have it." Kane left and went to another store. It was the only one left he hadn't checked for what he was looking for. As he entered, he thought to himself, it would be nice if they have what he need. Some unknown time later, the princess and her bodyguard entered the same store. They greeted the store owner and told him they were looking for something. "What are you looking for?" the store owner asked. The princess replied, "She's looking for an old tablet device, something that starts with TK." The man smiled. "Does she mean the TKXD2? It's been getting popular lately. A young man came in a while ago asking for it too." The princess was shocked. "A young man asked for it too?" The store owner nodded. "He sold his last one to him." Neriel whispered to the princess, "There's no way an ordinary person would buy such an old device." The princess speculated, "It must be the Artla organization that wants it." Neriel agreed. "Yes, they should try tracking the buyer." The princess turned to the store owner and said she really want to see the actual TK32XD2. "Can he describe who bought the last one?"